On January 21, 2026, President Donald Trump announced a significant shift in U.S. foreign policy regarding Greenland during a meeting with NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. This announcement came as a relief to many European leaders as it involved Trump abandoning his previous threats to impose tariffs on European countries that opposed his ambitions concerning the island. Key developments. 1. Withdrawal of tariff threats. Trump had initially threatened to impose a 10% tariff on goods from 8 European nations, escalating to 25% if the U.S. did not gain control over Greenland. However, during the Davos meeting he stated that these tariffs would not be enacted, citing a newly established framework for ongoing negotiations that he claimed would be beneficial for both the U.S. and its NATO allies. 2. Framework agreement. The agreement announced by Trump is described as a framework of a future deal regarding Greenland and the Arctic region. Importantly, Trump clarified that this arrangement would not lead to U.S. ownership of Greenland, a point consistently opposed by Denmark. Instead, the focus is on enhancing security cooperation to counter Russian and Chinese influence in Greenland. 3. Diplomatic context. The announcement followed tense discussions in diplomatic circles, particularly as European leaders were reacting to Trump's earlier tariff threats. The anticipation of potential trade wars had caused market volatility, but Trump's announcement resulted in a rebound in U.S. stock prices, providing relief to investors. 4. Negotiation dynamics. Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen welcomed Trump's decision to abandon military threats, emphasizing the importance of respectful negotiations that address U.S. security concerns while respecting Denmark's sovereignty. Trump indicated he was seeking immediate negotiations with Denmark, marking a departure from his previously aggressive stance. 5. Future steps. Trump outlined that further discussions would involve key U.S. officials, including Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, focusing on Greenland and Arctic security. He also mentioned a connection to the Golden Dome missile defense system, which he argued could be improved with U.S. control of Greenland. Common points across sources. All reports emphasized Trump's withdrawal of tariff threats as a crucial aspect of the announcement. There was consistent mention of the frameworks aimed to bolster Arctic security and prevent adversaries like Russia and China from establishing a presence in Greenland. The involvement of NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte was acknowledged across sources, highlighting his role in facilitating the agreement. Differences in coverage. Source 1 provided extensive context on the tariff threats and their implications for European relations, while Source 2 focused more on the details and implications for U.S.-Denmark relations. Source 3 highlighted the immediate market reactions to the announcement, noting the relief among investors, which was less emphasized in the other sources. Timeline of events. Pre-January 21, Trump threatened tariffs on European countries opposing U.S. efforts to acquire Greenland. January 21, Trump announces the framework agreement in Davos and cancels the planned tariffs, signaling a focus on negotiations instead of military action. Post-announcement, U.S. markets react positively. Denmark expresses willingness to engage in negotiations on security concerns while maintaining control over Greenland. In summary, Trump's announcement regarding Greenland represents a notable diplomatic shift, moving from aggressive tariff threats to collaborative discussions with NATO allies. This change reflects an attempt to navigate the complexities of U.S.-Denmark relations while addressing security concerns in the Arctic region. The announcement made by President Donald Trump on January 21, 2026 concerning a framework agreement for Greenland presents several counterintuitive aspects that might not align with conventional expectations of international negotiations and U.S. foreign policy dynamics. 1. Shift from aggression to diplomacy. Traditionally, Trump's rhetoric has been characterized by aggressive posturing, particularly regarding trade and territorial disputes. His previous threats to impose tariffs on European nations opposing his acquisition of Greenland were bold and confrontational. However, the abrupt shift to a diplomatic framework without the imposition of tariffs illustrates a significant pivot away from his typical approach. This counterintuitive change suggests that even in a political climate where bluster often prevails, there is room for negotiation and compromise when faced with potential economic backlash or diplomatic isolation. 2. Denmark's stance on sovereignty. Despite Trump's previous insistence on acquiring Greenland, a move that was met with a firm rejection from Denmark, his current announcement does not push for ownership but rather emphasizes security cooperation. This indicates a recognition of Denmark's sovereignty and an understanding that outright acquisition is not feasible. The counterintuitive element here is that Trump, who has historically shown a tendency to dictate terms, is now seeking collaborative discussions rather than unilateral demands. 3. Role of NATO. Trump's decision to incorporate NATO in the discussions about Greenland is notable. Traditionally, NATO's role has been more about collective defense rather than territorial negotiations of individual member states. By framing the agreement around NATO's involvement, Trump is positioning the Greenland issue within a larger context of Arctic security and alliance solidarity, which is a shift from the more transactional view he often expresses regarding international partnerships. This suggests a strategic recalibration that may enhance NATO's relevance in addressing global security challenges beyond mere military alliances. For market reaction, the immediate positive reaction of U.S. stock markets to Trump's announcement contradicts the typical economic logic that threats of tariffs and military posturing would create instability. Normally, aggressive trade threats lead to market volatility and uncertainty. However, by backing down from the tariff threats and announcing a framework for negotiation, investors interpreted this as a sign of reduced tension and potential economic stability, showcasing how diplomatic resolutions can positively impact market confidence. Contrary to expectations of market behavior in response to political threats. 5. National security justification. Trump's repeated claims that U.S. control of Greenland is essential for national security, particularly concerning the Golden Dome missile defense system, raise questions about the actual strategic necessity of such control. The counterintuitive angle here is that while Trump's rhetoric suggests an urgent need for territorial acquisition for security purposes, the framework agreement he is proposing does not include ownership, which implies that alternative forms of cooperation such as enhanced security partnerships could suffice for achieving similar objectives without the need for territorial expansion. 6. Immediate negotiations versus previous stance. Trump's call for immediate negotiations stands in stark contrast to his earlier threats of military action and economic coercion. This shift suggests a recognition that aggressive tactics may not yield the desired outcomes and that diplomatic channels can offer more sustainable solutions. The counterintuitive aspect is that in a highly polarized political environment, a leader known for confrontational tactics is opting for negotiation, which could be seen as a sign of political maturity or adaptability. In conclusion, Trump's announcement regarding Greenland demonstrates several counterintuitive dynamics in international relations, U.S. foreign policy, and market behavior. The shift from aggression to diplomacy, the recognition of Denmark's sovereignty, NATO's involvement in Arctic discussions, and the positive market response all reflect a complex interplay of factors that challenge conventional expectations of power politics. In the January 21, 2026 announcement by President Donald Trump regarding a framework agreement on Greenland, several important aspects are likely to be overlooked by the general public, which hold significant implications for international relations and U.S. foreign policy. Here are some critical content points and their significance. 1. Shift in U.S. foreign policy approach. The abandonment of tariff threats represents a substantial shift in U.S. foreign policy, particularly in its dealings with European allies. Initially, Trump's aggressive stance, which included the imposition of tariffs on European nations opposing the U.S. acquisition of Greenland, created significant diplomatic tensions. By retreating from these threats and opting for collaboration, Trump not only alleviated immediate economic concerns but also demonstrated a willingness to engage in diplomatic negotiations. This change is significant as it reflects a potential re-evaluation of how the U.S. interacts with its allies, emphasizing diplomacy over coercion. 2. Framework agreement ambiguity. While the announcement characterized the arrangement as a framework of a future deal, the lack of specifics invites scrutiny. Trump's vague references to enhanced security cooperation and preventing foreign influence in Greenland, coupled with the assertion that it would not involve U.S. ownership, leave many questions unanswered. This ambiguity could lead to misunderstandings or misinterpretations among stakeholders, particularly regarding Denmark's sovereign rights over Greenland. The significance lies in how such ambiguity can create a power vacuum where various interpretations could lead to further diplomatic complications. 3. Denmark's sovereignty and autonomy. Despite Trump's intentions, Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen emphasized the unwavering Danish position against ceding control of Greenland. The insistence on respecting Denmark's sovereignty is crucial as it highlights the delicate balance between U.S. interests and the rights of sovereign nations. The significance here is twofold. It underlines the potential for conflict between U.S. strategic interests and the principles of international law and sovereignty, and it raises questions about the future of U.S.-Danish relations. Denmark's firm stance can also galvanize other nations to resist perceived U.S. overreach. 4. Market reactions and economic implications. The immediate positive reaction of U.S. stock markets following the announcement indicates that economic stability is closely tied to diplomatic relations. Investors responded with relief to the de-escalation of tensions, suggesting that economic markets are highly sensitive to geopolitical stability. This reaction underscores the interconnectedness of foreign policy and economic health. The significance is that financial markets can influence political decisions as leaders may prioritize economic stability over aggressive foreign policy measures to maintain investor confidence. 5. Long-term security implications in the Arctic. Trump's focus on security cooperation in the Arctic, particularly in light of Russian and Chinese interests, points to a broader strategic aim beyond just Greenland. The Arctic region is increasingly becoming a focal point for geopolitical competition due to its resources and strategic shipping routes. The significance of this shift lies in the emerging dynamics of Arctic geopolitics, where U.S. actions could set precedents for military and economic engagements in the region, potentially igniting tensions with other Arctic nations and non-Arctic powers involved in the region. 6. Role of NATO in Arctic security. The involvement of NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte and the emphasis on a collective approach to Arctic security indicate a potential reassertion of NATO's role in addressing global security challenges. This could signal a shift towards multilateralism in the face of unilateral actions by powers like Russia and China. The significance is profound as it may reshape the NATO alliance's focus and operational priorities, potentially leading to increased military presence or collaborative security initiatives within the Arctic. 7. Impacts on future U.S. diplomacy. The announcement of immediate negotiations with Denmark suggests a new phase in U.S. diplomacy, one that may prioritize dialogue over demands. This shift could serve as a model for future U.S. interactions with other nations, fostering a more collaborative international environment. The significance here lies in how this approach could mitigate conflicts and build alliances, contrasting with previous tactics that relied heavily on threats and economic sanctions. Conclusion. The announcement regarding Greenland is a pivotal moment in U.S. foreign policy that reflects broader themes of diplomacy, international law, market dynamics, and geopolitical tensions. Recognizing the overlooked elements such as the implications for Denmark's sovereignty, the ambiguity of the framework agreement, and the potential shifts in NATO's strategic posture provides a deeper understanding of the complexities involved. These factors will likely shape not only U.S.-Danish relations but also the broader geopolitical landscape in the Arctic and beyond, influencing future interactions among global powers. 1. Shift in U.S. foreign policy. Trump's announcement marks a significant change in U.S. foreign policy regarding Greenland, transitioning from aggressive tariff threats to diplomatic negotiations. This pivot reflects a broader strategy to foster collaboration within NATO while addressing American security concerns in the Arctic. The decision to abandon tariffs is particularly noteworthy as it indicates a willingness to engage in constructive dialogue rather than resort to economic coercion. 2. Framework Agreement details. Although the specifics of the framework agreement remain vague, it aims to enhance security cooperation in the Arctic without pursuing U.S. ownership of Greenland. This is crucial given Denmark's firm stance against ceding control. The emphasis on preventing Russian and Chinese influence in the region highlights the geopolitical significance of Greenland, positioning the U.S. and its NATO allies as proactive defenders of Arctic security. 3. Diplomatic reactions and market impact. The announcement was met with relief from European leaders and investors, as it de-escalated tensions that had caused market volatility. Denmark's foreign minister welcomed the cessation of military threats and expressed a desire for respectful negotiations. The positive market reaction underscores the interconnectedness of geopolitical developments and economic stability, illustrating how diplomatic decisions can have immediate financial repercussions. 4. Future negotiation dynamics. Trump's call for immediate negotiations signals a shift towards collaborative discussions involving key U.S. officials. This move indicates a strategic approach to address both U.S. security interests and the concerns of Denmark and Greenland. The involvement of high-ranking officials such as Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio suggests that the U.S. is prioritizing this issue, which may lead to a more structured and formalized negotiation process in the future. 1. The purchase of Alaska 1867. In 1867, the United States negotiated the purchase of Alaska from Russia for $7.2 million. Secretary of State William H. Seward was instrumental in the acquisition, which was initially met with skepticism and referred to as Seward's folly by critics. However, the purchase was later recognized as a strategic success, providing the U.S. with valuable natural resources and a strategic military position in the Arctic. 2. The Panama Canal Treaty 1903. The construction of the Panama Canal was a significant engineering achievement that transformed global trade routes. The U.S. initially supported Panama's independence from Colombia and in return gained control over the canal zone. The treaty established the terms for U.S. control and oversight, which included military presence to protect the canal. This agreement was crucial for U.S. maritime trade and military strategy. Similar to the contemporary focus on Arctic security with Greenland. 3. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo 1848. This treaty ended the Mexican-American War and resulted in Mexico ceding a significant portion of its territory to the United States, including present-day California, Arizona, New Mexico, and parts of Colorado, Utah, and Nevada. The treaty was a pivotal moment in U.S. expansionism, reflecting similar themes of territorial acquisition and negotiations with foreign nations over land claims akin to Trump's approach towards Greenland. The announcement by President Donald Trump on January 21, 2026 regarding a framework agreement on Greenland represents a pivotal moment in U.S. foreign policy and international relations, particularly concerning the Arctic region. This development raises several implications and predictions for the future, both in terms of geopolitical dynamics and economic interactions. 1. Shift in diplomatic relations. Trump's decision to abandon tariff threats marks a significant shift towards a more diplomatic approach. This could signal a broader trend in U.S. foreign policy where aggressive tactics are replaced with negotiation and collaboration. As the U.S. seeks to strengthen ties with NATO allies, we may witness an increase in joint initiatives focused on security, economic partnerships, and regional stability. 2. Increased Arctic cooperation. The framework agreement is likely to enhance cooperation in the Arctic, particularly in addressing security concerns posed by Russia and China. This could lead to collaborative efforts in military and economic domains, fostering a united front among Arctic nations. As the Arctic becomes increasingly important due to climate change and resource availability, expect to see more multinational agreements aimed at sustainable development and environmental protection. 3. Impact on U.S.-Denmark relations. The cessation of tariff threats and the move towards negotiations could lead to a more amicable relationship between the US and Denmark. With Denmark's foreign minister expressing willingness to engage in respectful discussions, future dialogues may focus on shared security interests while respecting Denmark's sovereignty over Greenland. This could pave the way for joint military operations or cooperative ventures in the Arctic. 4. Economic ramifications. The abandonment of the planned tariffs will likely stabilize economic relations between the US and European nations, alleviating market volatility. Investors may find renewed confidence in transatlantic trade, leading to increased investments in both regions. Moreover, if the framework agreement leads to expanded US military presence or economic activities in Greenland, it could create new job opportunities and economic growth in the region. 5. Geopolitical rivalry in the Arctic. As the US and NATO allies strengthen their presence in Greenland, it is anticipated that Russia and China will respond with increased military and economic activities in the Arctic. The competition for influence in this strategically important region is likely to intensify, prompting the US and its allies to develop more robust strategies to counter potential adversaries. 6. Technological and defense developments. The mention of the Golden Dome missile defense system suggests a future where technological advancements play a key role in Arctic defense strategies. Expect to see increased investment in military technology and infrastructure in Greenland, enhancing the US's strategic capabilities in the region. This could also foster innovation in defense technologies, benefiting both the US and its allies. 7. Environmental considerations. As Arctic cooperation increases, environmental issues will likely become a focal point of discussions. The need to address climate change and protect the Arctic environment will become paramount, particularly as resource extraction activities grow. Future agreements may incorporate environmental safeguards to ensure sustainable practices, balancing economic interests with ecological preservation. 8. Public perception and domestic politics. Trump's approach to Greenland may influence public perception of his administration's foreign policy. If the framework agreement leads to tangible benefits for the US and its allies, it could bolster support for his administration. Conversely, any perceived failures or setbacks in negotiations could lead to criticism and impact domestic political dynamics, especially as the 2028 presidential election approaches. 9. Long-term strategic implications. The long-term implications of this agreement may extend beyond Greenland. By establishing a precedent for negotiation and collaboration in contentious areas, the US could reshape its global diplomatic strategy, reinforcing its leadership role in international affairs. This may encourage other nations to pursue similar approaches to resolve disputes, fostering a more collaborative global environment. Conclusion. The framework agreement announced by Trump on Greenland signifies a transformative moment in U.S. foreign policy, with potential ramifications that could reshape geopolitical dynamics, economic relationships, and environmental strategies in the Arctic and beyond. As negotiations progress and the international community responds, the coming years will be critical in determining the effectiveness of this new diplomatic approach and its impact on global stability and cooperation.